Hi, everyone. It's good to see you again. I'm Jerika Duncan.
And I'm Vladimir Duchik. It is good to see you, Jerika.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've teamed up together.
It's been a minute since you and I have been on the air together.
Yeah.
We are on the air at CBS This Morning quite often, but anchoring
like
CBSN.
This. Yeah, this should be fun.
It should be a good time. Good to have you. Anne-Marie's on a much-needed vacation, so we're in good hands with you.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, the 2020 candidates are hitting the campaign trail after battling through the latest Democratic debates. 10 more candidates faced off in Detroit last night, and once again, former Vice President Joe Biden and his moderate policies were the main target.
Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker were also forced to defend their past records on various issues. Ed O'Keefe has the latest from Detroit.
Former Vice President Joe Biden gave a stronger defense of his record than in the first debate, but it was by no means smooth. At the beginning of the debate, Biden shook hands with California Senator Kamala Harris and was heard saying, "Go easy on me, kid."
Mr. Vice President, you want to be president of the United States, you need to be able to answer the tough questions.
The House was set on fire, and you claimed responsibility for those laws.
For the second time, former Vice President Joe Biden found himself under fire from the rest of the Democratic field.
If you cross the border illegally, you should be able to be sent back. It's a crime.
It looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't.
But this time, Biden saw it coming.
So this idea is a bunch of malarkey.
And took on California Senator Kamala Harris on health care.
The senators had several plans so far. And anytime someone tells you you're going to get something good in 10 years, you should wonder why it takes 10 years. If you notice, there's no talk about the fact that the plan in 10 years will cost $3 trillion.
The reality is that our plan will bring health care to all Americans under a Medicare for All system. Under your plan, status quo, you do nothing to hold the insurance companies to task.
I have the only plan that limits the ability of insurance companies to charge unreasonable prices, flat out.
Harris herself became a bigger target, forced to defend her past record as California's Attorney General.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work.
But it was Biden's long record that got the most attention, even when he tried to pivot.
Why did you announce on the first day a zero-tolerance policy of stop and frisk and hire Rudy Giuliani's guy in 2007 when I was trying to get rid of the crack cocaine?
Mr. Vice President, there's a saying in my community, you're dipping into the Kool-Aid and you don't even know the flavor. You need to come to the city of Newark and see the reforms that we put in place. You are trying to shift the view from what you created.
And Biden tried to turn the attacks back toward President Trump.
8 more years of Donald Trump will change America in a fundamental way. The America we know will no longer exist.
When Democrats meet to debate again in September, it's expected there will be fewer candidates on stage because of stricter qualification rules. The next time, candidates will have to find at least 130,000 donors across the country and earn at least 2 percentage points in at least 4 polls. So far, only 7 of the 24 candidates have qualified. Vlad?
All right, Ed, we'll take it from here. Thank you. For more on this, we want to bring in CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Lynda Tran is also with us at the table. She's a CBSN political contributor, Democratic strategist, and founding partner at 270 Strategies. Lynda, I want to start with you. Is Joe Biden still considered the supposed front runner?
Absolutely. Look, he had a pretty low bar, let's be honest, for what his performance needed to be last night in order to shore up his donors, shore up the people who remember him as this magnanimous Uncle Joe. And he did that. He was able to parry with all of the candidates on stage who were attacking him consistently throughout the night. And, you know, he's only got up to go from here. That said, there were a number of other folks who were on stage with him, most notably, I would say Cory Booker had a really, really fantastic night. And so we're going to see some people starting to rise as well alongside him. So still the front runner. We'll see how big the gaps are.
So the question I have, Leslie, is when you look at the last couple of nights for both of these debates, Joe Biden still the front runner, as Lynda points out. But I wonder for how long, because it seemed to me that there are others on that stage who are better suited to address what the Democrats across this country are saying is most important to them. And that because Joe Biden's record is so long and storied, and a lot of people place a lot of value in that, but that it's going to be easy, as you saw. I never thought I would watch a debate where Democrats would go after Barack Obama, but they did right. because Joe Biden has aligned himself so closely with the former president.
Right, and the biggest accomplishments, meaning Obamacare, are which is a big part. The healthcare debate is a big part of this conversation. So there's no way to realign himself with that. He has a long history, but really the story question is establishment candidate, like we saw last time, versus more of somebody who's much more grassroots oriented. You still have the Bernie Sanders folks who are engaged, but now they're dropping into this kind of Elizabeth Warren camp. But I think about comparison with Republican debates. Marco Rubio was fantastic. We had a lot of people that were stars at the debates, but that didn't mean they could galvanize an audience. You think of people that were big orators like Newt Gingrich, who had a lot of messaging and, we're going to change and transform America, never had a constituency. So these can be breakout stars in the sense of they can be future leaders of the party, they can be future cabinet members, they can run for different offices, but are they ready to be commander in chief? The contrast is very stark.
I just think it's hard. I think that it's very difficult. Not I think. What I saw was Joe Biden in both debates did not have to face Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, right. which represent that wing of the Democrats that want to see significant change within the party, Linda. Well, and until he does, he's not really been proven.
Except that he was on stage with Bernie Sanders last go around, right. and Bernie Sanders just didn't step up to the plate on that front. Right. I mean, I have to say, we obviously in the analysis make a lot about the divide between the progressives and the moderates, but just bigger picture. 2020 will be as much about rallying behind whomever the Democratic nominee as it is about repudiating Donald Trump. And honestly, I gotta say, no matter who the nominee is, there are going to be many, many voters all around the country who are coming out explicitly because they do not like the direction the country is going in. They do not like the behavior, the rhetoric, the racism that's coming out of the White House. And so to a certain extent, all will be forgotten once we make that pivot towards the nominee.
I think we argue that point a lot, and I wonder, and internally and on the Republican side, we argue the same thing, because you have the purists who say you really have to reform from the inside. There's still a lot of a concern about transparency within both parties, or particularly on the Democratic side. Where's the money going? Is the party really going to change? Are they going to really move those progressive policies? And if you think about states like Michigan, where the third-party candidates had a bigger, a significant impact in terms of grabbing votes that could have gone to the Democrats, third-party candidates or people sitting this out become really important.
And do you think that Biden is trying to capitalize on that and trying to still play it safe in a sense? Play that moderate role instead of being as extreme as we've seen, like with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren?
Right. So I like to think about it in terms of the Rust Belt and look at the political map. When you start thinking about states that John McCain could not win, but that Donald Trump could, it's completely inverse. So Donald Trump was able to make inroads in there, but it's a one-time election. The question is, can somebody like a Joe Biden come in and grab those traditionally blue states and pull them back? If you're going to do it, it's on the bread and butter economic issues, nothing too particularly progressive, when we're talking especially about issues like Medicare for all or decriminalization of the border, or specifically here trade, not dealing with trade as aggressively enough. That's what the measurement stick's going to be for voters that aren't necessarily in the Republican camp and don't necessarily consider themselves, as single issue voters on the Democratic side.
I would just say, though, that when it comes to Democratic strategy about 2020, it's not just about those who are already in the electorate. It's also going to be about growing the pie. And that was what was a critical ingredient in the success for many, many Democrats around the country in 2018, and will certainly be part of the play in 2020.
So let me ask you this, Linda. You pointed to the fact that Cory Booker had a very strong night last night. He was very clear in articulating his policy positions. It felt to me as if Kamala Harris struggled a bit in some of her explanations of her policies. She was able to hit back at the vice president when it came to his health care plan, but then she was attacked on several fronts for her plans for health care. So is this a moment? This was a pivotal moment for Cory Booker. Do you think that he's going to make the next debate? Think he'll have enough?
Yes, I do think he's definitely going to be on stage in September. And I think last night was kind of the opening bell for him. People got to see the charismatic side of him that you often hear about when you're in the room. When you're face to face with him, he's incredibly charming, incredibly articulate, and real as can be. And so I think we really got to see that last night. He was maybe the most comfortable person on stage.
Yeah. What did you make of the Kool-Aid comment?
I thought it was hysterical and so classic Cory Booker. And for most people, if you've been following his career. You remember him talking about Hot Pockets, you know, so it was kind of amusing. But if you haven't seen him before, it felt like a zinger. It didn't feel premeditated. It felt like it related to part of the story he was trying to tell about the community he's lived in, the community he represents.
Yeah, and he also zinged the vice president when he said, look, they were asking the vice president, the former vice president, specific questions about President Obama's policies, and the vice president sort of dodged the question, and Senator Booker said, look, you're the one talking about Barack Obama more than anybody on this stage. It can't be to your advantage when you want it to be, and for you to be silent on it when there's a question that's being posed directly to you with policies that the Democrats are moving away from.
Sure, like the former President Barack Obama was called deporter-in-chief because he deported more undocumented immigrants than any other president before them, including all the Republicans. And that's still a standard that he continues to hold. So you're exactly right.
Leslie, just want to get a quick question in before we have to go, but which candidate do you think is the most threatening to President Trump right now?
It continues to be Joe Biden. He's the most consistent with some of those Rust Belt states we talked about.
Let me ask one last question to you, Lynda. I find that these Democrats, when they are talking about decriminalizing the border, are not explaining to the American people what they mean. It is true that oftentimes the Democrats will say you're using a Republican talking point by calling it decriminalization at the border, because we're not saying, the Democrats say, that we're going to have open borders, which is what the president tweets about constantly. Julian Castro tried to explain it, but again, I thought he fell sort of short of what it actually means when you say decriminalization at the border, which is what the Trump administration has used to separate children and to separate and to put them in cages.
Yeah, and Julian Castro has tried to really cast it in terms of morality and what kind of country are we if we are willing to tear women and children apart, if we're willing to turn away individuals who are seeking asylum, which is their legal right to do because they're escaping persecution. That doesn't always come across. The other piece that I thought was really interesting about the overall conversation about immigration last night was actually Andrew Yang, who I would say was the second big winner, unexpected out of the night. You know, he turned the whole conversation on its head by saying, listen, we keep talking about immigrants as a burden. We keep talking about immigrants as criminals. And really, this country was built by immigrants. And hey, look at all the contributions that immigrants make all the time. We're doing this wrong.
I thought it was interesting, too. He turned to technology as something we should be more
high-tech labor.
Right.
Yeah. Yang Gang.
That's the Yang Gang. They were happy. They had to have been happy.
All right, Leslie and Lynda, we will see you guys.
Thank you for letting us coordinate our outfits.
Yes.
Anytime.
Plan this.
Anytime.
Look at that. Look at the camera. That's incredible. Wow.
Team CBSN.
Yes,
Team CBSN.
News.
We color coordinate here. Thank you very much.